He moved from humble and tumultuous beginnings, addiction and dysfunction, to a life he never dreamed possible. And here to tell us all about it today is the amazing Daryl Dittmer. Daryl, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. We were chatting a little bit before we got a chance to hit the record button. And I already know that this is going to be a fun conversation just because you're a fun person and you've got such a story to tell. And I love it. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your upbringing and where you are now. So where did you grow up and where are you living at this point?
I grew up in the Midwest in Michigan, and I was born in Detroit, actually, but then my younger years were sort of suburbs, and then my early teen, from that point forward, we moved out to a little farming town. And that was that. I feel like that's kind of where my life started. That's where I got my feet wet in terms of Protestant work ethic, in terms of, living the life, or at least doing my best to live the life that I was charged with living at that point in my life, which had to do with discipline, had to do with respect, had to do with yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, that kind of thing. That was how I was raised and reared. And anyway, that was a cool place to start. And now we live in the mountains of North Georgia, because I'm trying to get back to my country roots to the extent that I can.
I actually have family in the Upper Peninsula in Iron Mountain, Michigan. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
So. It truly is. Oh, it truly is. My wife and I are actually planning an RV trip to go to all around Michigan again, and we know it. We know it extremely well. We both grew up there, and but I can't wait to get back to the Upper Peninsula. Beautiful place.
Yeah, it really is. I went there in December one year to go and just hang out with my family and visit. And we ended up driving all the way up to the Thumb, which was a long drive in a blizzard. And I drove the whole way. And it was terrifying for me because at that point, I'd been living in LA for 14 years.
I could see where that would be terrifying. They don't have a lot of snow on the 405.
Yeah, not so much. So you had to go through a lot of stuff, especially when you were younger. You went through some stuff that I know you're not very proud of, but that stuff is what made you who you are now. Those are the things that you learned from and grew from. So can we talk a little bit about what it is that you had to experience in your past that put you on the road to where you are now?
Sure. So much of my life now is telling my story so that other people can relate and hopefully find some ways to maybe change themselves, or at least find places to change themselves. And for me, I started drinking, I was 13. I think it was a pretty typical story of drinking in youth and trying things and that sort of stuff. So that wasn't weird. But I think the part was weird how much I enjoyed it and how much I wanted to do it again, and I wanted to do it more. And then, people would and once I got into that sort of lifestyle and surrounded by some of those folks that supported that lifestyle, and we supported each other in that lifestyle, then, different things came along. Drugs came along, and harder drugs came along, and all of those things that I was brought up to do and believe, and all those sorts of things just kind of got thrown out the window. And I think that was, and everybody's got their story. There's the progression of the disease of alcoholism or drug addiction, or however you want to term it. But and there's the stories, and there's the things that make our journey or my journey different from somebody else's journey. But and those are also the things that people can say, well, I can't really relate to that. But I can tell you what people can relate to is they can relate to that tug and that grating inside of us, and that friction, and that I don't want to do this, but I'm still doing it. And I don't want to be this way. And I don't want to be a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And all of those things are things that I became. And on the other end was I didn't want to be that way, but I didn't know how to be different. And I didn't know how to cope with life without some sort of a substance inside of me, this stuff we pour in from the outside that we feel is going to change us on the inside, and it never does. The only thing it can do is exacerbate our issues.
Right.
So that's what the drinking and the drugs did for me, and they pulled me down a road that I was not proud of, and till when I got to be 19 years old, it was more or less an intervention, and I ended up in a 30-day inpatient drug and alcohol treatment program.
Those programs are tough enough for somebody who's had some serious life experience and they're 30, 40 years old. I can't imagine being 19 and going through this. This had to be one of the most terrifying experiences.
It was terrifying. And that tug and that push pull, and those not wanting to let anybody down but letting everybody down, wanting to do things differently but not wanting to do things differently, that ripping me in half sort of thing. And it was terrifying because I didn't want to tell my parents the stuff that I was doing. I didn't want to tell them the drugs that I was doing, and I didn't want to go to this place for 30 days, but there was a little bit of an inflection point where it was a couple days before I went into treatment, and this is where I believe, the way I look back at it now, I believe I got to a point where I said, you know what, I have to do this. It was New Year's Eve going into 1985. And I was at a New Year's Eve party, and I was around several hundred people. I don't know how many people were there, a couple hundred, maybe 300. But anyway, it was I'd never been so lonely. I'd never been so isolated in terms of how I felt, and that nobody around me could understand, and this and that. And it was, I'm sure, a gigantic pity party for myself. And I wasn't sure at that point whether I still wanted to be on this planet. And I think that was the point where I had to get to decide that I wanted something different.
Yeah, that's rough. And one of the things that a lot of people forget is that drugs are expensive. You have to turn to nefarious ways of getting the money to be able to pay for the drugs. In most cases. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And what a lot of other people have a difficult time wrapping their brain around is, when I talk to people about human trafficking, occasionally I'll get the question, why didn't you just run? Why didn't you just get out and run away? Why didn't you just quit? It doesn't work that way. And so many people just don't understand that. This is a deep-seated, rooted thing in you. And you have to do a lot of work to dig it out. And some people never accomplish that. So my hat's off to you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. So well said. It's the reason, I think, not the reason we try it, not the reason we, may try it a couple times, but it's the reason we dive in. It's whatever turmoil is going on, and then we exacerbate that turmoil by continuing to do the things that we don't feel good about, and we just go down this rabbit hole. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it was a fairly quick, it was quick. I mean, between 13 and 19, a lot of people go drink till they're 50, or drug till they're 50 or 60 or whatever the time frame is. But mine was a fairly fast turnaround, which I'm eternally grateful for now.
Yeah. And I've known a few people that 30 days just wasn't enough for them. And I always encourage them, if it's not enough, that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean that you're failing at this. It means you're still trying. It means you have to keep trying. You have to keep pushing through this. I knew a man who went through the same thing multiple times. And until he went for 180 days, he could not move on from that past life. It's completely different for everybody, and there's no one size fits all.
So true. So true. I couldn't agree more. I I went through my 30 days. I got two things out of treatment. First thing was I got hope that I could live a better life, that I could feel better, that I could look people in the eye, that I could have some confidence, all those things I wanted so badly. And the other thing I got was the 12 steps. And that was, there weren't a ton of things to do back then. It was 1985, so it wasn't, we didn't have the myriad of things that I think we have now, or even social media. I know a lot of people get support through social media, and I think that's a wonderful thing. So that was what I got from treatment, and that was the mode that I was operating in for years and years, to try to uh, change what was going on in here, so that I didn't have to continue to put substances in myself to feel normal or good.
Right. Yeah. And then, as well as the 12-step program, they typically have like mentors and leaders and that kind of stuff. Did you experience any kind of real kinship or help from somebody like that?
I absolutely did. I had a gentleman who was where I was going to my 12 step. It was AA, and the gentleman that I met, his name was Bud, and I knew I was looking for someone, and they said, find somebody that you'd like to emulate. And nobody that was my age did I want to emulate, because I was an idiot, and I was doing silly stuff, and I was doing things that didn't make sense, and so I wanted someone who was a little older, and Bud was in his 50s at that time, and he became my sponsor or my mentor, and he taught me so many things about the simplicity of living a different life. I'm eternally grateful.
I love people like that. They come into your life for a reason. They stick around for as long as you need. Are you still in contact with them now?
But unfortunately passed away in 2016, and but I was in contact with him. I saw him probably a year before he passed away.
Oh, oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad he knew what kind of an impact he had on your life.
He
He
did.
probably needed you as much as you needed him.
You know, I wouldn't have known that could have been the case back then, because I needed him pretty bad.
Yeah.
But at that point, I think there's always something about giving it away that helps us continue on our path, right? Like there's always something about moving it forward and paying it forward, and doing the best we can for others, that helps us in our path. We don't do it to help ourselves, but we do it because that's our charge, and that's what makes sense after a period of time, once we gather some of this stuff to give it away. And so I think that it did do good things for Bud, and he and I developed a wonderful friendship. And but he was always the guy. He was when I used to go to I was in I'll keep this short, but I was in college, and when I first met Bud, and some of the guys that I knew in college, one was a sober guy, but other people would say, "Oh, did you go get your word from Bud?" Because they always knew, once I sat down with Bud, or I talked to him, or things were different for me, and things felt better for me, and um, couldn't have asked for anything more.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have one friend like that. Yeah, it's that kind of person where you can tell them anything, and they're not going to judge you because they've been there, and they love you anyway, in spite of everything, and maybe even because of everything. They love you anyway. Such amazing people they are. Now, if you will indulge me, I'm going to take a chapter of your book. It's called When I Stop Fighting: The Unexpected Joy of Getting My Head Out of My Ass. Love the title. But I
Thank
have
you.
one particular paragraph that when I was reading this, it really kind of stood out to me. And I just want to share that now. And then maybe I can get you to tell us a lot more to this story. It's in chapter 6. I know you're very familiar with your book, but you might not know it off the top of your head. So I will give you the chapter title. It's Zig Says, Shut the fuck up. But this paragraph, it says, I know how simple it sounds, but I remembered it. I remember it for a reason. It was a turning point for me. It was the start of paying attention and listening to that little voice, which I can probably call at least a close cousin of conscience. It was the first time I remember making a conscious decision to be a useful member of my family, a person who cares about something other than my selfish ends, a person who can decide to do things because they're the right thing to do, not just because I think I will benefit in some way. I hope a lot more people have those moments, but I remember that moment for me. You remember that moment too. I can tell from the look on your face. What can you tell us about everything that led up to that moment?
I do. I remember it, and it actually makes me a little emotional because it had to do with my mom, and that was, and she passed away in 2001, and she got to see me sober for quite some time, which was cool, which was a wonderful thing. So it's for me addiction, and I think for a lot of folks, it's characterized by there's a selfishness and a self-centeredness and a self-loathing and a lot of those things that can kind of come along with that. And I was no different. I was very interested in me. I was interested in how I could get what I wanted from every day, and do the things that I needed to do or felt that I needed to do for me. And there wasn't a thought of other people or what I can contribute or how I can be better. And there was a there was a time, and I remember this as a kid, and my mom in the morning, she'd walk and she'd have her robe on or something, and she'd pull out a tissue and it would fall on the floor. And and I would not spend a half a second to bend over and pick up that tissue. I didn't care, not my problem. I have stuff to do. I have Daryl things I have to do, et cetera, et cetera. But there was a moment where I was faced with a decision after I got sober and after I started to recover and after I started to get my head out of my ass. And I saw the tissue in the hallway, and I had a little battle with myself. And I said, you know what, Daryl, you need to stop being lazy. You need to stop being a bum. You need to do something that doesn't have to do with you. And I bent over and I picked up the tissue and I threw it away. And that moment changed my life forever because I can't walk past things anymore without doing something about them. And especially if I can help another person, if I can give a smile, if I can do simple things, even for a stranger, I cannot allow myself to not do those things at this point in my life.
You know, what a beautiful way to say that. And honestly, that's one of the most powerful paragraphs I think I've come across in my time of doing this podcast, because it does encompass all of that. When you start doing the little things, is when your life changes in a big way. It's beautiful.
100%. Yeah, it really is. And I heard somebody say a long time ago, nobody ever tripped over Pikes Peak. And, it's always the little stuff that gets you, right?
Yeah.
But it's also the little stuff that helps you. It's the little things that we do on a daily basis that, they're not world changers. At least we don't think they're world changers, but they are world changers, because every time I'm involved in improving me, every time I'm involved in helping someone else improve their life, I'm changing the world. And I don't mean that from an ego perspective. I mean that from the perspective of that's real. Every time Amanda does something for somebody, every time my brother does something, all these things contribute to us being in a better place with each other. And I just think that's incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And what is one of your, I don't know about you, but I always have a favorite part of every book that I've ever written. Can you think of a favorite part in this specific book?
I can. There's a chapter called "Thank You, Jimmy," and so I was young in my recovery, and I'm certain less than a year, which is really young in recovery, especially as I look back. It's things change so much over the course of time that the early on is early. So I go to this meeting. It's the community center meeting, and it's a Friday night meeting, and it's in a nearby city, and my buddies and I go, and some of them are pretty serious about recovery. Some of them, not so much. Whatever. They're just kind of doing what we're doing, and that's normal. For recovery. Most end up not at some point, and fortunately some do. But so we'd go to this meeting, and there was this older gentleman, and his name was Jimmy, and he's always at the meeting. And at that time, he had been sober for almost 40 years, and nobody really knew exactly, but we knew it was right around 40 years, and we're like, man, this dude he's a deity. He's floating. He's above all us clowns. He's just a guy, and we all looked up to him like that. But he was young, and he looked a little frail, or I'm not. He was older, and he looked a little frail, and he walked a little hunched over, and that sort of thing. But you could feel the wisdom, which was really cool. And he was the only guy at that meeting that would go grab the coffee pot and walk around the tables and go to everybody's coffee and fill up their coffee. Jimmy was the only person that did that. And I just thought that was the coolest demonstration of just humility, right? Like in serving and being selfless and those sorts of things. And I remember that just as clear as day. And one of the things that Jimmy used to say that I've carried with me because I watched him do it is he always used to say, if you really want to grow in this life and you really want to move forward, you have to learn how to stay small. Don't get full of yourself. Don't think you have all the answers. Understand that you don't know. And that's when this life can come to you, if you allow it to. So stay small is something that I have carried with me for a long, long time now, and it's changed my life immensely.
In that same chapter, you actually have a Shakespeare quote that's quite famous, but most people don't know the whole thing. And this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night and day. Thou canst not be false to any man. And that's such a perfect addition to that chapter.
Thank you. I love that quote. That quote is near and dear to my heart because if I'm being true to myself, I cannot be false to other people. And if I'm being true to other people, I cannot be false to myself. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful, well encapsulated, everything's in there kind of quote. And I've carried that in my pocket every day as well. My pockets are full of all these beautiful things that people have taught me over the years, and I love it. I'm so grateful for everything.
I can't help but think that that's the way Jimmy lived his life too.
100%.
What a cool dude. Yeah, what a cool dude. Well, it has come to that point in the show where I have to ask you my very last question, which is unfortunate because I think I could probably sit here and talk to you for 2 hours about this book. And I know you have another one coming out, so I'm super excited about that. If you don't mind, I'd like to have you back on the show again when that happens.
Love that.
But my last question, the answer can change depending on what it is that you're feeling and what kind of day that you've had. What is one thing that you truly love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
The first thing that came into my being was my disciplines. and I don't even know that that's something I love about myself, but it's something I love about what I do for myself, because if I don't have those disciplines, I don't have anything. And I'll tell you what those disciplines are, because I opened my mouth and told you it was disciplines. But the disciplines for me are, in the morning, I do breath work, which is, probably 20 minutes of breathing exercises. And for people like me, from a recovery perspective, it's really important we we keep our stress at a reasonable level, we take care of our bodies, we do all the things that we need to do to have a holistic approach to this life in terms of our overall health, mind, body, heart, and soul. So it starts with breath work for me, and then it goes into meditation, which I do every single day. And between those two things, that's probably 45 minutes, can be an hour. Sometimes, I just kind of get lost in there and I just go, and I come back around. I'm like, oh, that's been a long time. But those are beautiful things. And then I practice gratitude every single day. And gratitude for me is something it's just kind of baked in at this point, but I understand that taking the time to recognize the things I'm grateful for on a daily basis keep me from a lot of things that I could want or desire or flip out about or whatever. When I look at what I have as opposed to what I want, it's a beautiful thing. So disciplines are something I love about myself and my life.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.